Hello! Today we are going to talk about how to write eloquently, avoiding wordiness and improving rhythm in sentences. My name is Kristen Hamilton. I am the owner and the sole employee of Kristen Corrects. I have been editing books for about 10 years now. And I love it. It's really awesome. I specialize in fiction. I do everything under the fiction umbrella. There are many elements that go into a successful novel. There's the conflict, there's the pacing, the character development. All of this comes together to create a hard to put down novel. But this class talks about an equally important aspect of your writing: the mechanics of writing, sentence structure, rhythm in writing, readability and flow. These are essentially all the things that I look at in my line editing service, my most popular editing service. We are going to be talking about 12 different aspects, 12 different methods I use when editing. Split up into 3 different sections: how to reduce wordiness and streamline your writing, varying your sentences to create rhythmic writing, and words and phrases to avoid in your writing. It's going to be a lot of information covered. Make sure you have a pencil and a notebook so you can take notes. If you have any questions, I'm going to be answering questions via text in the Discord chat. So if you have any questions at any time during the video, feel free to drop them. Okay, so let's get started. How to reduce wordiness and streamline your writing. Too much wordiness in a sentence can make an author sound amateurish for a couple of reasons. Number 1, it makes your message less clear. Number 2, it clutters your writing and it makes you sound less eloquent. The self-published book market is so saturated. It's so saturated that you need to make sure that you are publishing your best book possible. Present your story concisely and clearly to get positive reviews and word-of-mouth referrals to buy your book. And this, of course, will help grow your reader base. There are several ways that I use when I'm editing to reduce wordiness and streamline your writing. Okay, here we go. Number 1, look for sentences that start with there is, there are, there was, there were. Some variation of that. There is. In most cases, the there is or there were can be cut out from the beginning of your sentence without disrupting the meaning of your sentence. Doing this will immediately streamline your writing. So let's look at an example. There is a cat that is on the fence. Can easily be transformed into a cat is on the fence. Pay attention to the relative pronoun that usually follows there is, there are, there were. The that clutters your writing. So if you take a look at that example, there is a cat that is on the fence. Between those 3 words, there is and that's 3 words that you could cut out, okay? So to streamline your writing, you want to make sure that you're taking out the there is, there was, there were, as well as the that sometimes mostly occurs later in that sentence. So another example would be, there was a path that led through the forest. And this could be transformed to a path led through the forest. Okay, next one. Use an active verb. So to take your writing to the next level, you get rid of there is, right? In that sentence, there is a cat that is on the fence. Get rid of that. Just say a cat is on the fence. Now you can strengthen it even further by using an active verb. Use an exciting active verb to show the action. So let's use an example. There were some storm clouds in the distance. Instead, you could say, storm clouds rumbled in the distance. Ooh, isn't that so much better already? There was a path that led through the forest. Remember this one? You could say, character name, Sally, followed the path through the forest. So here's a tip for you guys. If you're working in Microsoft Word, which most authors do, not all of them, but most authors do. I know editors work in Microsoft Word. If you're using Microsoft Word, you can use the find and replace function to easily locate all instances of there is, or there was, or there were, or whatever variation you have. Eliminate redundancy. Redundancy is where the author uses more words than necessary. A redundant sentence is usually wordy, repetitive, and confusing. So, for example, Michelle was supposed to have her car's oil changed every 3,000 miles, and since it had been 3,000 miles since her last oil change, she took her car to the mechanic. Bleh, right? So let's change it. Michelle took her car to the mechanic to have the oil changed since it had been 3,000 miles since the last one. It's still a long sentence, okay, and that's fine. It's a lot less confusing, a lot less wordy, right? So one thing that you should ask yourself when you're writing and when you're self-editing is, does all this information that I'm cramming into this sentence, does it really need to be in there? So here's another alternative, okay? Michelle took her car to the mechanic to have the oil changed. Bam! Mic drop, right? It's so much simpler. It's so much simpler. If that information doesn't need to be in there, don't include it. Good writing is all about whittling down your message to be as clear and concise as possible. Redundancy can also exist in dialogue tags, okay? So the repetition of he said, she said, he said, she said, he said, she said, all the way down the page. See it all the time. Listen to this example. Let's go out to eat instead, Janice said. I need to stop by the bank first, Mike said. The bank is across the street from that new Italian restaurant, Janice said. Italian sounds delicious, Mike said. After a while, that said gets super redundant, super repetitive, super irritating, right? And as the author, you want to make your readers, you want to make the reading experience as seamless and smooth as possible. So cut out all these redundancies, all these repetitions of the word said, of that dialogue tag. This is especially true if you're if there are only two characters in the scene and they're talking back and forth to each other. Of course, you want to include a dialogue tag every once in a while just to keep readers, just to keep them straight on who is talking. But when there's only two characters in a dialogue scene, there is no reason whatsoever to have that many dialogue tags, one after the other. So cut those out. Cut prepositional phrases where possible. Overuse of prepositional phrases can make the sentence seem overly formal, meandering, and confusing to readers. The biggest issue that I see with prepositional phrases is where an author uses of the instead of apostrophe s. So, for example, she rummaged in the side pocket of the backpack. This would easily be reconstructed as she rummaged in the backpack's side pocket. So to avoid prepositional phrases, you can use the active voice. So in the active voice, the subject is first, followed by the action. So instead of saying, this house was designed by an architect, prepositional phrase, an architect designed this house. Ta-da! It's easy! It's easy for me. Okay, moving on. Okay, so varying your sentences to create rhythmic writing. Yay! One mark of a talented author is rhythmic writing. And this is not something that is going to slip by unnoticed among your readers. Rhythmic writing, however, is a difficult strength to master. Rhythm in writing is defined as the way the words and sounds come across on the page, usually to create a beat. Long sentences might sound smoother and more rich, where short sentences are snappier and easier to understand. When these two types of sentences are combined, that's when the magic happens. They can create an incredible rhythm to your writing flow. If you read a paragraph and you find yourself drawn into the smooth flow of the sentences, alternating between long sentences and short sentences, you're reading something with good rhythm. So let's look at an example of rhythm in writing, okay? This is an excerpt from Anthony Doerr's All the Light We Cannot See. Amazing book, amazing book. I did not edit it. I wish I did. I wish I did, but I didn't. Okay. When she opens the bedroom window, the noise of the airplanes becomes louder. Otherwise, the night is dreadfully silent. No engines, no voices, no clatter, no sirens, no footfalls on the cobbles, not even gulls. Just a high tide, 1 block away and 6 stories below, lapping at the base of the city walls. And something else. Something rattling softly, very close. She eases open the left-hand shutter and runs her fingers up the slats of the right. A sheet of paper has lodged there. Doesn't that sound so good? You just read it and it's like, oh, it's like a fine wine. Okay, so how do you get rhythm in your writing? The number one tip is to vary the length of your sentences. So don't overuse any one sentence type, construction, or any one sentence length, as this can become distracting. You're going to want to use a mix of short and long sentences to create beautiful prose. Offset longer paragraphs with short one-sentence paragraphs, especially to draw attention to something. So let's do another example, okay? This is from Insights, If Boys Never Learn, Men Won't Know by Quincy C. Newell. And I have edited this one, okay? And it's beautiful writing. Listen to this. Did you know that there is no such thing as fear? Really, it doesn't exist. Fear is a name that was created to identify a biological reaction that your body has to certain external and internal stimuli. That's why fear is purely individual. Every person has a different set of fears that's personal to them. Did you notice? Short sentences, long sentences, medium sentences. Creates beautiful rhythm. So make sure you're applying this in your writing. Next, you can use different sentence constructions. Okay. Sometimes the problem with authors writing is the way that authors structure the sentences are too similar. The subject, verb, object sentence structure is the most basic and most commonly used sentence construction. But that can become grating to the reader if it's used too often, too many times in a row. So here are 8 ways to write sentences in your novel. Number 1, with a subject. The subject, verb, object sentence structure is the most commonly used. It's the basic sentence structure. It's the kind we were all taught in elementary school, right? So in this example, I take another drag off my cigarette and pour what's left of my beer down my throat. This is from a book I've edited. These are all these examples that I'm using are from books that I've edited. But did you notice it was the subject, verb, object? I take another drag off my cigarette and blah, 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 blah. So that's the subject starting your sentence, okay? You can also create sentences starting with a phrase. A phrase is a group of words without a verb. For example, at the end of the day, what really matters between two people is their compassion for each other. You can also start a sentence with a clause. A clause is a group of words with a verb. Stone dust swirled up around them as Lana cradled Priya to her chest. And if you notice, if you use these different sentence structures, you will start to create prose that is differentiated, it's varied, it has good rhythm, it's not repetitive, and it will make you come across as very eloquent. You can also start a sentence with an adverb. An adverb modifies a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. For example, finally, the tunnel widened and the darkness gave way to light. You can also start a sentence with an adjective, which modifies a noun or describes a noun. For example, rebuffed that a woman would question his bookkeeping skills, the teller donned the spectacles that he bought last week. You start a sentence with a gerund. A gerund is the ing form of a verb. Hacking into Fortune's computer system, he found a trail of drugs, guns, and female trafficking. You can start a sentence with an infinitive. An infinitive is the base form of the verb. It has to in front of it. So to be, to talk, to eat. For example, to avoid my brother, I walked down the back stairway and ran to the front door. And finally, you can structure your sentence starting with a correlative conjunction, which is two parts of a sentence that work together, like either or, if then, whether or. In many cases, the second then can be left off in an if-then conjunction. So, for example, if Yeshua had come and healed Laz, then I would have never known this joy. And actually in this book, this is from one of the books that I edited, the then is not in the sentence. You don't need it. It clutters your writing. Okay, so moving on to continue varying your sentences with rhythmic writing. This is more of a self-editing tactic. You want to read your work aloud. It's the best way to see if anything is off in your writing, with the rhythm specifically. A too long sentence might make you run out of breath, for example, or too many short sentences will make your writing sound choppy. As you are reading your work aloud, you will want to notice the words or the syllables that naturally become stressed in the rhythm of your writing. Are these the words that you want emphasized? That's a really good question to ask. And if not, something obviously needs to change. Our brains naturally pay more attention to the beginnings and the endings of sentences. Something I learned in college, yes. The beginnings and endings of sentences and paragraphs. So that's why when I'm editing, I pay very close attention to how sentences end particularly. Another thing to keep in mind is your word choice. You want to make sure that the not only the verb, but also the adjective, the different parts of speech that you use are accurate, they're powerful, they're emotion-filled. These are the types of words, this is the type of writing that will make your book stand out We also naturally emphasize shorter sentences and words. So these will stick out more, whether we're reading silently or aloud. So to wrap up this section, let's talk about a few tips and tricks to keep in mind when you are writing and self-editing your novel. Use longer sentences at the beginning of your paragraphs and a short sentence at the end. This helps create really nice rhythm in your writing. Super short sentences, like 5 words or fewer, can be used to draw emphasis to an idea. So use these for drama. You can even break up long paragraphs by a short 1-sentence paragraph, especially in high-stakes scenes. This is a really, really good tool to use, and I'm constantly finding myself breaking up paragraphs in different ways to create better rhythm in authors' writing, especially during the climax, high-stakes scenes, like any of the climax of Act 1 or any of the obstacle scenes or anything like that. Punctuation is a really valuable tool. You can use punctuation or my favorite, M dashes. I love M dashes. I love M dashes. Basically like the hyphen, but long. Yeah. So you can use M dashes to draw emphasis to different parts of your sentence. Personally, I like to offset the end of a particularly powerful or long sentence by adding an M dash. For example, Dana removed the cap from the pen, signed the contract, and handed it back to Tom without looking at him. Annoyed, he could tell. And the M dash is in there. It also creates a really nice look on your page. Instead of just this big jumble of text, you have very occasionally, you have M dashes, you have italics, you have long paragraphs and 1-sentence paragraphs and medium length paragraphs. So there's a lot of different things that you can do to play around with it and just find your style, find your writing style. Okay, words and phrases to avoid. As an author, your purpose is to create books that are as concise as possible. That means cutting out whatever words or sentences that don't propel your book forward. So this one is a big one that I have seen, at least. Body parts and corresponding verbs. When explaining something your character is doing, there's no need to include the body part that the character is nodding or kicking or squinting or shrugging, for example. Especially when this is inferred, that's an important part that I need to add. So certain body parts go with specific verbs. For example, it's impossible to squint anything else on your body except for your eyes, right? What else would you shrug if not your shoulders, right? For example, she shrugged her shoulders, unsure of the answer. Could easily be condensed to she shrugged, unsure of her answer. Cutting out 2 words. There you go. Stan reached out his hand to pet the dog. Stan reached out to pet the dog. Or you could even say Stan pet the dog. See? We just keep trimming, just keep cutting. Yes, Sarah said, nodding her head. Yes, Sarah said, nodding. Simple, simple. Simplifying and cutting it out. So what are some other examples of verbs and body parts? This is my list. Nod, his or her head. Reach out, his or her hand. Shrug, shrugging shoulders. Kicking the foot or a leg. Squinting eyes. These are all prime examples of things I've seen too many times, too many times in the books that I've edited. She shrugged her shoulders. What else is she gonna shrug, you know? So keep that in mind as you're writing. Common crutch words are a little too common, okay? Things like very, like, well. There was, there is, there are, there were. We already talked about that. Sudden or suddenly, that comes up a lot. Went is a big one. Was, were. Began with a verb. So this character began talking, or he began looking around. Why not just look around? Why not just talk? So began is the big one I see a lot. Or was or were verbing. He was talking. He was looking around. He was eating. Variations of the verb to be, conjugations of the verb to be are a common issue that I've seen in books that I've edited many, many times. Other common crutch words, look or glance. Characters are frequently looking up, looking down, looking over here, looking over there. Or glance, glance up, glance down. Things like that. I see it all the time. Also sigh. The character sighed. Oh, did this sigh. It happens a lot. It happens a lot. To the point where it almost seems to be becoming a cliche. A character says something and sighs. And it's like, okay, that's fine. If it's totally fine if it's happens occasionally in your book, absolutely. But there have been authors that I have worked with where the characters are constantly sighing, or they're constantly looking or glancing, or it can get very repetitive. It gets very repetitive, and these are the types of things that weaken your writing. Other crutch words: really, had, that, just, some, and adverbs ending in ly. Especially when paired with dialogue tags, I've found. For example, let's get out of here, John said quietly. Why not say, use a better verb choice. Let's get out of here, John whispered. Whispered, yes. See, there you go. So get rid of as many adverbs ending in ly as much as possible. And finally, needless qualifiers. You want to get these out of your writing. Overusing qualifiers can make your writing sound sloppy. Words like really, very, probably, definitely, simply, actually, mostly, and certainly. So here's a fun example. Because a great many of the words in this sentence are basically unnecessary, it would really be a very good idea to edit somewhat for conciseness. Right? That could be transformed to, because many of the words in this sentence are unnecessary, we should edit it. So much simpler, so much clearer, right? Another example, he never really knew how he was doing. Not really. And this one is a little less obvious, but having the really and really 2 times in 2 sentences back to back. He never really knew what he was doing. Not really. It's a little bit repetitive, right? So we can cut out that first really so that it says, he never knew what he was doing. Not really. Same exact meaning, 1 less word. Okay, so that's it. That's the whole presentation. I hope you guys learned something. I have this entire presentation written out. I've been staring at my notes this whole time. and I'm happy to send it to you. I'll drop it in the group chat where we're talking, so everyone can have a transcription available, as well as at the end of this is a checklist for how to write eloquently. That basically covers everything that I've talked about. Okay, so I'm going to be hanging out in the group chat on Discord. So if you haven't already, please be sure to drop your questions and we can have a nice conversation about whatever is confusing you, or areas that you're having issues with, or things that I talked about in this presentation that you just didn't understand. If you have specific examples from your own manuscript that you want to talk through, let's talk. Let's do it, definitely. Okay, so I'm going to end this video. See you guys in the group chat. Okay, bye.